and welcome to 2021's Green Slime Awards. So for those of you who don't know, the Green Slimes are Bubonicons annual tribute to the worst genre things of the year. We tend to focus on books, movies, television, toys, and other things that are genre related, science fiction or fantasy. So we're going to get started today with a TV show category. So we've been really lucky this year in terms of TV. There's been a lot of great stuff through the streaming services and even on regular TV. There's definitely been some clunkers. Shout out to Debris, which I think made it through about 4 or 5 episodes before we decided that mankind's love and generosity overcomes all was more than we could stand for about 5 minutes. But, you know, there's one show that, having watched, we agreed was probably the worst of the year. So coming to you from Netflix, we decided that Fate the Winx Saga was probably the worst show of the year. So for those of you who don't know what this one is, in theory, Fate's the Winx Saga from the Vampire Diaries producer Brian Young is an adaptation of an Italian cartoon called Winx Club, which was on Nickelodeon. The Netflix version has far more aesthetically in common with the CW drama than its source material. The source material, according to somebody, looks like what might have happened if a psychedelic Lisa Frank cartoon came to life. So this one, it's a story of a group of best friends who face challenges within a magical world and overcome them together. And then what they said, Fate the Winx Saga is a story about heterosexual romances in a magical world. So this show was just odd. They essentially took what was an adorably cute, bubbly, happy, thing about fairies going to school and having adventures, and turned it into the, noir-esque, violent, horror-laden YA version of something akin to Riverdale or Vampire Diaries. So needless to say that it's kind of a jarring transition there. As someone said, of course, with the writing staff of the Vampire Diaries, the vibe of Winx Saga becomes pretty clear. Love triangles, teenage insecurity, and predictable plot twists are laid on thick, and it is hard to spot anything of the original source material besides the concept of there being fairies. In terms of the characters, someone said all of the main characters are walking stereotypes and tropes. Bloom is your fish-out-of-water protagonist. Tara is every Hollywood stereotype of plus-sized women. Stella is just a mean girl, and Beatrix is a cartoon villain. Really, I think somebody nailed it best when I posted about this show on Facebook and how much I was really not liking it. They were like, yeah, it's like they took something that was really interesting and diverse and just made it really completely whitewashed, bland, and violent at the same time. It was just such an odd choice. Someone said it manages to feel simultaneously slow and rushed, with uneven pacing that never quite manages to resolve itself by the end. There were times I was bored and tuned out, only for the scene to jump in with a bunch of big events or expository dialogue that took me by surprise. And somebody else said, it's the strangest adaptation I've ever seen. I've never seen a spin-off diverge this suddenly and intensely from its source material. It reminded me of that Dora the Explorer sketch from Funny or Die. So for those of you who have seen that, and let me tell you, it is way better than Fate the Winx Saga, and I suggest you go check that one out instead of wasting your time on this. Alright, I think I'll have a little snack right now. I bought some of these Minion Vanilla Cake Bites because I love Minions, if we're going to be honest. One thing I don't understand first off about them is why in the world they're vanilla. Because you would think Minion. Wouldn't it be, banana or papaya? I don't know. Let's check these things out. So, some of the reviews I read online after I bought these were things like, these are disgusting. They were terrible. I paid almost $8 for this. I don't know if I like them or not. The texture reminds me of Play-Doh. But still, you look, you think, how bad could it be? It's a nice big piece. And then you open it and you realize that literally this is the amount of cake you get. And I will say, the person who said it looks like Play-Doh They are correct because, I mean, these things look like they have utterly no, like, cake crumb to them, and they just look mildly horrifying. So, maybe I will pass on those. All right, so we've done our television show, we've done our snack. Next, we're going to be moving on to what I think is not only the worst fantasy book of the year, but probably one of the worst ones I've ever had to read a little bit of. I will own I did not read much. So this year's Green Slime Book Award goes to Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. And I realize I am not the audience for this book. I am not a 14-year-old teenage girl and, black eyeliner. But a lot of people were that girl when this is a sequel to, or prequel really, to the Twilight series, which follows along the same path but from Edward's point of view. And most of the reviews I read for this are, people my age were, people who read the first books when they came out as teenagers, loved them, went back to this and were like, oh my god, why did I like these books? I was an idiot. So I actually just have one review I'm going to read as a whole because it amused me so much, and I think it summed up a lot of the comments I saw about this book. So this review is by a woman named Lindsay Darling, who said, look, I'm reading this for high school Lindsay. She had to suffer through the low-rise jean phase, so I owe it to her. Even though she and I will never be cool with Bella's full-length khaki skirt. And then she updated this. Did not finish this book at 34%. Look, I can't even do this for low-rise high school Lindsay. I'd like to say she'd understand, but the day Stephanie Meyer posted the leaked chapters for this book on her website, high school Lindsay drove to the public library after school just to read them. And she loved them, because high school Lindsay was a moron. A lot of the dialogue in this makes no sense from Edward's point of view. It's almost as if Stephanie Myers was writing all these inner monologues for Edward and then remembered she needed to include dialogue from the first Twilight book. So she just plopped it in random places. None of his thoughts are snarky or amused, but his dialogue certainly is. The two don't match. And yes, I'm aware not everyone says what they're thinking. But there were parts of Twilight where he seemed genuinely amused by Bella, yet none of his thoughts reflect that. Thus it feels patched together. It's really a shame this didn't come out 14 years ago. High school Lindsay would have already owned a pillowcase of the cover. As it is, present-day Lindsay is still suffering from the effects low-rise jeans had on her hips, so I'm not even sorry for quitting this book. And I feel that really just kind of sums up what everyone had to say about Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer.
And the new girl, is she disappointed in the gossip as well? Really? I listened to hear what this new girl, Bella, thought of Jessica's story. What did she see when she looked at the strange, chalky-skinned family that was universally avoided? Sure, that's why they're in high school. This is rich.
Hey, Stacy, what you doing?
Oh, hey, Daniel. I'm just trying to read Stephanie Meyer's Midnight Sun. I was inspired by Bubonicon's dramatic reading of Froome, so I thought I'd give this brick of a book a shot.
And how's that going?
Not so great. I mean, listen to this. Bella Swan walked into the flow of heated air that blew toward me from the vent. Her scent hit me like a battering ram, like an exploding grenade. There was no image violent enough to encompass that force of what happened to me in that moment.
Wow, that's kind of pretentious and kind of creepy.
Exactly, and yet I think 14-year-old me would have really liked this writing. Let's see what you find.
Okay, let's look. Oh! I owed her honesty. Still, I tried to smile to make my words sound less threatening. What if I'm not a superhero? What if I'm the bad guy? Her eyes widened by a fraction and her lips fell slightly apart. Oh, she said, and then after another second, I see. She'd finally heard me. Wow.
Here, listen to this. Now for my apology. I've never tried to dazzle Bella on purpose before, but this seemed like a good moment. I stared deep into her eyes as I drove away from the school, wondering whether I was doing it right. I used my most persuasive tone. Yeah, That's not rapey at all.
Wait, let me see this book.
Oh, God, Daniel, you don't have to be so
Oh,
pushy.
I'm sorry, Stace. The putridness of this is making me anxious to finish the book.
Point taken.
Oh, hey, here's a coincidence. Meyer wants to get to the end, too. I wanted to finish this quickly. We drove through the night, only decreasing our speed occasionally when I heard a speed trap waiting ahead. I wondered what the tracker made of that. Heard a speed trap?
How is that possible?
I don't get it.
Time for one more quote from the final page. 1 minute. I'm going to need to flip there. It's a huge book, in case we haven't mentioned that.
You doing okay down there? What's going on, Stace?
I decided we could use a little playfulness. You're ready now, then? I asked, raising one eyebrow. Yes? She swallowed, nervous. I leaned in, closer to her, keeping my movement unhurried. My lips finally touched the skin of her throat. She swallowed again. Right now? I whispered. She shivered. Nope, I can't do it. I can't read anymore.
Oh. Yeah, that seems like the appropriate reaction. Good night, Gracie!
Our next category, we're on to the movies. So I actually have 2 movies for you this year. One of which is a teen superhero film, which I'm sure you've already figured out what it is. And the other was a sci-fi piece of dreck that was, I'm sure, in a normal year, it'd be a total VOD, disappeared, sold in the Walmart $5 bin kind of film. But got a little bit more attention this year because of everything going on. So I'm going to start with our teen movie, which, as I'm sure you've already figured out, was The New Mutants, which came in with a 35% score on Rotten Tomatoes. So I'm going to read you some of the stuff people had to say about this. While The New Mutants aspires to some inventive mashup of high school soap, haunted house movie, and comic book origin story, each of its elements feels half-baked, as if the director studied Buffy for reference and clearly paid as little attention to it as his horny, preoccupied protagonists. This cross between Flatliners and The Breakfast Club is uninspired. The characters are flat stereotypes: the rich kid, the country bumpkin, the cool but mean girl, the meek religious girl, and the kind inquisitive girl. And the superficial dialogue could have been written by bored preteens at a Saturday night slumber party. In fact, The New Mutants feels like a Disney Channel TV movie from the early 2000s in its scripting and performances, with comfortingly predictable individual story arcs and plotting dialogue. The climactic showdown has all the visual flair and dramatic force of a bin fire. So needless to say, I'm sure you've all heard a lot about this film. It was originally supposed to come out in 2018, and it got delayed for a variety of reasons. Reshoots, the pandemic, all of that. And then they finally decided to dump it out this year as the very first new movie to release in theaters, which I think they hoped would mean it would just kind of disappear quietly because everybody would be too scared to go out, but it did not. So one of my favorite things I think I read about this was, so help me, I really do feel sorry for the New Mutants and the poor saps who made it. If all had gone according to plan, it would have slunk into theaters in 2018, gotten bored reviews comparing it unfavorably to Logan as an example of trying to do a different genre than action thriller using the ingredients of a superhero movie. The usual fans of the X-Men franchise would have seen it. It would have earned a series low of about 140 million worldwide, and everybody involved would have bolted to other projects to lick their wounds. Instead, it got stuck with Fox, who weren't sure if they wanted it to be less or more of a horror movie, and ordering up some reshoots that possibly never even occurred. Then stuck with Disney, who had a very clear idea of what they wanted their comic book movies to look like, and this was not it. It got delayed and delayed and delayed, becoming more and more a visible embarrassment every day, until it finally stumbled into the most glaring light possible as the first big studio release after the first great coronavirus quarantine of 2020, and as the film that has thus faded to slam the door shut on the pre-Disney incarnation of X-Men series, of which it ultimately became lucky number 13. I mean, the film's bad and all, but it didn't deserve that. And I will say, I mean, having watched it, I don't even think it's so much as film is the worst thing you've ever seen, so much as it is boring and not an X-Men movie. They rarely go into, you know, who the kids are supposed to be in terms of the X-Men universe. It really is an origin story of these kids who, with undefined powers, trapped in an asylum and trying to escape, which is not really what you want in an X-Men film. They really just did not think this one through at all, which is why we're giving the New Mutants a Green Slime Award. Okay, so we have one last award, which is our Sci-Fi Movie Award for the year. And this one comes in with 20% on Rotten Tomatoes and 3.1 on IMDb, and it is called Breach. You can find it on Amazon Prime. So this movie is your typical VOD, horrible sci-fi channel-esque schlock, with the one exception that it happens to be starring Bruce Willis. Not quite sure why he agreed to do this, but he did. So the plot centers on a parasitic alien chomping its way through the crew hired to keep a vessel ticking while the passengers are cryogenically sleeping out a 6-month journey. The filmmakers, having borrowed storyline from Alien, also go for the same blue-collar, boiler suit-wearing truckers in space realism. Bruce Willis growls a few lines, half-asses a catchphrase or two, and points a gun. As more and more crew members are consumed by the malevolent alien force, and the shuttle continues to hurtle towards its new Earth destination, the heroic space maids fashion powerful weapons from their cleaning supplies and concoct a last-ditch gamble to save the cryosleepers and themselves before it's too late. Unfortunately, in space, no one can hear you clean. All right, those who know me know I actually kind of love super terrible, schlocky, you know, sci-fi-esque movies. But this one was really just nonsensical and boring and bad. As someone said, in Breach, the effects are bad, the dialogue is terrible, the story is shoddy, the whole affair is such that after about 10 minutes you start to realize, oh, maybe those first few scenes weren't a fluke. But rather that the whole thing may be as bad as you've seen so far. To be honest, it just gets worse. They are not exaggerating. As it continues, you're just like, why? Why? What were they thinking and why? So as I said, Bruce Willis is in this one. Somebody said, Bruce Willis has had some pretty low-grade stinkers in his long cinematic career, just as he's also had his genuine greats. His latest sci-fi fiction film, Breach, will likely leave everyone scratching their heads as to how he's outdone them all, and not in a good way. It really just is not a redeeming film. As someone said, I wish I could say there was anything redeeming to find in Breach, or a way to have some fun with it, but I really can't. Even the MST3K crew would have a hard time finding a way to spin this one. Which, you know, when you think about the fact they did Mac and Me, I feel like is really saying something here. So our final award of the evening goes to Breach, which you can watch on Amazon Prime. And now I'm going to turn it over to the Green Slime puppet players to bring us home.
Me, do, la, re, fa, sol, la, ti, do, me.
Jim, what are you waiting for?
I'm waiting for my intro.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Jim the Dinosaur and the musical stylings of Breach.
Yes, thank you, Maestro. A bouncy little G, if you would. Breach, the Breach. We're watching Breach and hating Breach. It's all about a cryogenic sleeper spaceship headed out to Eden, brother. To form a colony. That's the way we became the New Earth Bunch. The New Earth Bunch. The New Earth Bunch. Shh. Here comes the good part. There's an alien aboard, but not a cool H.R. Geiger alien. It's an alien slug. It gets in you, and you become a space zombie. Yes, space zombie. An incredible, indestructible space zombie. Bullets and fire can't stop you. Even a space grenade just means you have to crawl your pieces back together again.
Is this really necessary? And what's with the cat ears? Cats was last year.
Oh, and Bruce Willis. Did I mention Bruce Willis? He's too old and cranky to climb through a die-hard ventilation shaft. So he gets a younger space janitor to do it. And do we ever talk about where the alien comes from? Of course not. Of course not. Oh my gosh. What am I doing? I can't do this. This isn't going to help my career. What happened to me? And then why Bruce Willis and director John Suits? Why? It all makes no sense. Game over, man. Game over.
There. It'll be okay. Do you see what you've done, Breach? I hope you're all happy. Okay, honey. Let's take the cat ears off and go get you a nice fudge sundae.
With sprinkles?
Yes, you can have sprinkles, and we'll talk about your bad musical choices.
Okay.
All right, thank you for joining us for this year's Green Slime Awards. Be sure to stick around for the Bubonicon closing ceremonies, and we hope we see you all live and in person in 2022. Bye.